99% of us have the dream of listeners, not being the musicians, the listeners, right? And we crave one thing, even though we kind of don't know it all the time. We crave to be in the room with the musician the day it was recorded, the day it was played. And we go to live concerts and we get that as much as we can, but then we listen to the other 99% of our stuff recorded. And it turns out the farther back you go in history, the little rougher it sounds. And so we said there's a solution to this. Let's separate the performance as a thing out from the recording, which was how it was made. You know, the thing with microphones in the room and all that day. But the performance itself was how the musicians worked their fingers and what instruments they were using, and it's the data hidden inside the recording. In order to do this, it's a lot of hardware and software that runs in a very high resolution, and Yamaha makes an incredible thing called the Disklavier Pro that looks like a nice grand piano there, and you probably didn't realize it's going to do all these things, but full of solenoids and fiber optics and computers and all these kinds of stuff. The highest resolution out of Japan, and this just didn't work until we could cross this line that says high definition. And we were able to cross this line called the uncanny valley in terms of artificial intelligence terms. We have a process where we kind of put it into the computer and digitize it, and then a whole lot of analysis, and we look at every single note and all the attributes of those notes, how hard they were struck and how they were held down and how you move the finger. So we had to develop a whole new science of how you move your fingers, and it's the things your piano teacher teaches you. We never had a science behind these kinds of things. I'm going to start with Glenn Gould. He died 25 years ago this year and was born 75 years ago this year. Was a beloved pianist, maybe the great cult pianist of the 20th century. He just got tired of being in front of an audience and felt like a performing monkey was his term. So he stepped back and did nothing but the crafting of his work. And Gould's specialty was playing Bach. His maybe most famous recording was something called the Goldberg Variations. Bach only wrote themes and variations one time. He wrote some early pieces, but late in his life, in his mature period, he said, here's a theme, 30 variations. In fact, the theme isn't even the melody, it's the bass line. And Gould recorded it in two major recordings that you may know about, one in mono and one in stereo. And the one in mono, by the way, he used the pedal, and as he got older, he said, no, wait a minute, I'm going to get very scientific about this and not use the pedal. What I'd like you to hear live is the 1955 version, and we'll play the first couple pieces of it. Glenn Gould, 1955. How about that? So let me tell you a little bit how this was done. First of all, let me get you to the end step. This says we have a fairly complex process that's, software and musicians and so on. But when we're all done, we know that the ear is the final arbiter. We can play the original in one ear and a new recording in the other. So what I'm going to do this for you right now. What you just heard, and in the right speaker is going to be the original recording, and the left speaker is going to be the new recording, actually of an instrument just like that one. And I'm going to play them together at the same time. That's the original. Before Jurassic Park, there was no science for how skin hung off of muscle, right? So in the video world, we've been able to invent in our lifetimes natural behavior, and this is kind of another example of putting a science behind natural behavior, and then you heard the original. Ultimately, I started with the experience, and the experience is I want to be in the room and hear the musicians. Lots of you can afford to buy one of these. But if not, there is now high-definition surround sound. And I got to tell you, if you haven't heard high-definition surround, go down to your audio dealer, your audiophile dealer. It's so involving compared to regular stereo. But if you don't have that, maybe you can listen in your headphones. And so on the same disc, we have 5 recordings. Sony has 5 recordings. And you can listen in headphones with this thing called binaural recording. And it's a dummy head that sits in front of the instrument. And it's got microphones where the ears are. And when you put on headphones and you listen to this, you're inside of Glenn Gould's body. And it is a chuckle until, the musicians who play the piano listen to this and say, I can't believe it. It's just what it's like to play the piano. Except now you're inside Glenn Gould's body playing the piano, and it feels like your fingers making the decisions and moving through the whole process. It's a game changer. Here's now something we know in spectacular quality. The whole process is very sensitive to temperature and humidity. What you heard today was not perfect. It's an amalgam of wood and cast iron and felt and steel strings and all these, and they're all amazingly sensitive to temperature and humidity. So when you go into the recording session, you get to stop after every piece and rebuild the piano if you need to. And there's the whole action there, sitting kind of on the side, and the dummy head, and our recording engineer standing around while we rebuild the piano. Without putting dates next to these things, step by step, music will be turned into data, like every field that's occurred in the past 35 or 40 years. Audio has come very late to this game. I'm not talking about digitizing in bits and remastering. I'm talking about turning it into the data that it was made from, which is how it was performed. And audio came very late because our ears are so hard to fool. They're high resolution and they're wired straight to our emotions. And you can't trick them very easily. Your eyes are pretty happy with some color and movement, All right, there's this episode of Star Trek. Again, it was all just laden for me yesterday there. The episode of Star Trek for me was James Daly played Methuselah. Remember this one?